one of the things that I really like when it comes to Power BI, which is your MVP or your proof of concept. And some organizations will take this to different levels, and I'll give the team an opportunity here to chime in on it. But the anecdote that I have is always, I've seen lots and lots of CIOs in the past that have either gotten in a lot of hot water or even lost their jobs because they weren't able to draw data in a meaningful way out of a new ERP implementation or out of a promised database upgrade or putting in a new reporting infrastructure. And one of the ways that we have noticed that the way that we are developing the Power BI platform moving forward is creating a system, as Daniel had mentioned, a lot like Agile, where you're able to get something in front of a usable product in front of somebody quickly that's at that stakeholder level so they can give you that quick iterative feedback. And that's where the MVP really comes in handy, because if you've identified what that business process is, you've identified what some of these key metrics and data points are that you want to be measuring, then you want to kind of create something as quickly as possible to get it in the hands of people so they can say, I like this, I don't like this.
Exactly. And, there's kind of like three main things you're looking for in the proof of concept that, it's easy to fail fast with. Generally, we're going back to our business case, some like any sort of process or desire for reporting to be available to people, that's typically what we're going to be using for our proof of concept. And what the proof of concept allows for is to, before you go on any overhauls of your backend data systems, we can use data that is readily available and start generating visuals for users immediately. And at the same time that we're sort of scoping out what a new process or new data architecture may look like that can empower Power BI for the future, we're also presenting the audience with visuals and new experiences in Power BI that allow them to look at it, say exactly what they don't want to see and exactly what they do want to see, and start to understand our audience a little bit more. Because what we found time and time again is you can't get feedback on something people don't want to look at in the first place. So you have to, what the proof of concept allows is a very low overhead approach to giving your audience a sample of Power BI and all of its functionality. And immediately you're given feedback that if they're not looking at it, there's obviously nothing compelling there. And you can start to iterate upon the design and the way metrics are coming together, and overall the user stories and how you're presenting the data to people. And typically, once you start creating some compelling user stories, then you'll start getting feedback that is the most crucial, which is design or feature requests and design requests from your users, because that means you've now got an engaged audience. And as soon as you have that engaged audience, that's where you can start using their feedback as almost like blurbs on the back of a book to say, this department's loving it. Now we're going to go take this to a board meeting and show them exactly what this is. And hopefully by the end of the proof of concept, we have a lot of executive buy-in, and people are starting to really clamor for the functionality that we were able to uncover in the proof of concept. Because the proof of concept, to kind of reiterate, is all about getting the users engaged, and it's not about overhauling your data culture yet, because really what it's all about is showing what Power BI can do for a specific subset of users after you've identified that audience and identified exactly what they need to kind of make their lives easier on a day-to-day basis.
And Christian, how long does it typically take for us to, or for what is a good time frame for trying to get an MVP or a proof of concept in the hands of someone after you've established kind of the front end frameworking that typically happens? Like, what do you guys aim for in order to try to make sure that there's no lag in engagement when it comes to the shareholders and the department leads?
Yeah, so depending on data accessibility, data sources, I've had run-ins with APIs that might take a little bit longer, but more often than not, I have a working product out in front of a client, in between 4 and 6 weeks. So it's not super short, but it's also not terribly long, like a full-fledged fixed scope project. And usually that identifies within that time frame, it identifies lacks too in either their processes, data for particular metrics that they'd like to see in this POC. So then I can go back and we can have a discussion about, okay, how do we get this data, right? And that goes back to the process map that we had before, where, okay, now we can kind of see, okay, we need to pull this data from here, get it in, build out the metrics. And then from there, usually we get some really good feedback, because that's usually when they start approaching stakeholders and executives to get increased buy-in into using this. Well, not necessarily the proof of concept to use it since it's not production ready, but at least take a look at it, get exposure to Power BI and the capabilities that it does have to improve their reporting.
The tactility of the product too is what I think makes it the most important part of the MVP. Is, normally in reporting you would have SSRS reports and or paginated reports, and you have like PDF data, or you have static reports and graphs that you'll see. This really allows you to be able to give people a chance to interact with the data, and I think that, to me, that's the point where people are like, oh, like it changes things. To me, it reminds me of I like to buy, I've not just lately, but I buy a lot of vinyl. I have my entire life because I like the tactility of music. I like the ability of opening the sleeve and reading things and holding my album and stuff. And I think the digital sounds great. It's not a sound thing for me. It's the experience of being able to interact physically with something that I really enjoy. And I think when it comes to business, for people to be able to interact with their data in that way changes the way that they look at their data processes, data curation, right? Like all these different business things that before were kind of like black boxes, like you said. Mm-hmm. Now it starts to make sense to them. They're like, well, if I'm clicking into this, I'm moving this around. What does this mean? They get excited. I've seen it.
Yeah.
Typically, I like to relate it to a few things, and typically with going back to SSAS, they use the word perspectives a lot because it's certain ways that the data can be interpreted. However, there's still a lot of abstraction between general data users and the people putting together these perspectives and views for a lot of these users. And in SSRS, and even other paginated reporting systems, you have to kind of request how you want to see the data and your own perspective of the data in your hands. But I've kind of adopted the word perspective as a Power BI developer because it's really the moment a user sees for the first time the ability to shift perspectives on the same piece of data is really when they start to understand the power of Power BI. Because the moment that they're able to see a organizational level view right in front of them on their screen with all of the same KPIs, but with about 3 clicks and maybe one control click. I know that's a little bit difficult for some users, but just after a few clicks, they're able to shift the perspective on the same page to a singular department in a singular region and with a singular manager to get insights on them immediately. It's all there without having to request a new paginated report, without having to request a new SSAS cube or a new perspective in their SSAS implementation. And it's all immediate. The moment that someone sees that they can go from an extremely high level to an extremely low level, and then even change their perspective horizontally, laterally, to look at finer levels of detail from something that was a pie chart but is now a table right in front of them with all of the records that populate that pie chart. The moment a user experiences that the first time is really when they kind of the light bulb goes off in their head and they're like, Power BI is something I really want to start using.